involved locally, provincially, and nationally. I'd like to say thank you to Gilead's Times and Strength for sponsoring this event. Without their generous support, tonight's event would not be possible. A couple of housekeeping notes. The bathrooms, those of you need them, are down the hall and towards the staircase. This evening will be videotaped, so we would appreciate it if you keep the background noise down to a minimum, please. And please turn off your cell phones while the speakers are on. And on important time this evening, as you know, the International AIDS Conference is the premier gathering of those working in the field of HIV/AIDS, as well as policymakers, people living with HIV, and others who attending this event. We're happy to all join us tonight as we hear about the latest updates that come at the conference from our two fantastic speakers. Probably familiar faces to everyone in the room. Our first speaker tonight is Dr. Julio Montaner, Professor of Medicine and Head of Division of the AIDS. He is Professor of Medicine and the Head of the Division of AIDS in BC. He also holds the endowment chair in the AIDS research. He's the Director of the BC Center for Excellence in HIV and AIDS, and past president of the International AIDS Society. He played a key role in establishing the efficiency of the highly active antiretroviral therapy first, and since then has established a role, a part of the financial support of the BC Ministry of Health Services. An avant-garde award from the National Institutes of Produce in the U.S., and as well as Canadian Institutes of Health Research, Merck, BC Healthcare, Data Sciences, Sharing, Dr. Montaner will be answering the questions immediately following his presentation, as he has another commitment this evening. So at this point, I'd like to bring Dr. Montaner up.
And thank you all for being here today. Thank you to Gilead for sponsoring the event. I think it's fair to say that treatment prevention was really the dominant theme at the International AIDS Conference this year. In fact, this has become a bit of a trend. We've seen over the last decade that what started as a potential hypothesis has become really the dominant theme in the field as a whole. And I'm really pleased that the Americans are coming forward, as you will see as I present some of this data, because with their support, the likelihood is that this will continue to grow in the years to come. That's my disclosure. Suffice to say that I take money from anybody, but it's all for a good cause. The story starts back a number of years when, as you can see here, AIDS started in North America in the early 80s, and the rate of death was accumulating at a rather alarming rate. As you can see here, it took us about a decade, but in the mid-90s, we found a way forward, triple therapy or highly active antiretroviral therapy, and with that, mortality in British Columbia decreased quite markedly, and the life expectancy in people infected with HIV has continued to grow. The estimate today is that with active antiretroviral therapy, you add 5 decades of healthy life to an individual infected, say, in the second to third decade of their life. So while we haven't solved the problem altogether, I think it's fair to say that we have managed to change the outlook of HIV infection among those that can access treatment successfully quite markedly. For us, the pivotal moment regarding treatment and prevention came up in 1989, 3 years after we started our rollout of antiretroviral therapy, when we were looking at these kind of stats, and we were seeing that prior to the rollout of antiretroviral therapy, prior to 1996, we had fairly stable rates of new HIV infections, and that after 1996, we saw a step-down decrease in about 40 to 50% in the number of new cases that were diagnosed in the province of British Columbia. As you can see, that reached a plateau here. I will discuss that further later on. But it's important to notice that this was happening at a time in which the number of syphilis cases in British Columbia was actually on the up and up and up, indicating that the decrease in the HIV new cases could not be related to a more conservative sexual behavior at a time in which most of the infections that were accruing were related to sexual transmission, but rather to something else. At the time we argued that it was through the role of antiretroviral therapy. We now know that that hypothesis was correct. The second piece of the puzzle relates to the transmission of HIV from mother to child among women infected with HIV who were pregnant. And what you can see here is that prior to 1996, the rate of transmission from an infected mother here in the red to the offspring on the blue was approximately 50%. With better obstetric practices, that rate increased to about 30%, but notice that it wasn't getting any better in the early 90s. And yet, after 1996, quite clearly, the number of children born with HIV as a result of vertical transmission decreases markedly in Canada, and in fact, the number of women that are becoming pregnant also increases, suggesting that something was preferentially stopping transmission from mother to child, and of course that was ultimately antiretroviral therapy, highly active antiretroviral therapy. So around this time, 2000, we started to advocate the potential role that antiretroviral therapy could have if we were to roll out antiretroviral therapy maximally among people who needed treatment. We argued that we could actually decrease morbidity, we could decrease mortality, and we can ultimately prevent HIV transmission. We argued this point in a paper that we published in 2006, eventually, in The Lancet, where we said that there was a strong case to be made for expanding the access to highly active antiretroviral therapy to curb the growth of the HIV epidemic. But for you people, I need to make extremely clear the fact that the motivation for us to get involved in this discussion came out of a phone call that I received from the Deputy Minister of Health in the first part of the 2000 years, where the Deputy told me at that time that the cost of antiretroviral therapy per capita in British Columbia was increasing, that was a problem, and that even a good thing could become unaffordable. And my response to her was, slow down, you're missing the point. The problem, the reason why the treatment is becoming more expensive is because we have better drugs that are affording people to be on treatment for a longer period of time with less side effects. And more importantly, by us being able to now give treatment to more people with safer medication for a longer period of time, we're going to continue to contribute greatly to decreasing the expansion of the epidemic. So the foremost motivation for us to engage in this discussion was we wanted to protect us from being able to bring you, people who needed access to antiretroviral therapy, unrestricted access to treatment at a time in which the government was considering putting quotas on the number of people that were accessing treatment because of cost issues. In other words, saving upfront in the access to treatment was foolish in our opinion, and this paper actually managed to convince them that that was the case. In this paper, we also made the case that if you were to take a single geographical jurisdiction and you were to inundate it with antiretroviral therapy, in other words, make treatment available to everybody that was infected with HIV, you could actually see a very significant difference on the outcome. So, for example, in South Africa, if you were to continue treating the tail end of the epidemic, namely people who were getting sick, I'd say approximately 30% of those infected, you would be chasing the tail of the epidemic for years to come. The prevalence, the number of people living with HIV would stabilize at a much higher rate. These would have an ever-increasing cost, which was ultimately unsustainable. So we made the case that if you were to treat everybody at a given point, what you would see would be a decrease in the number of people living with HIV, as that generation of people infected with HIV would enjoy their life to its fulfillment, but in fact, we would stop transmission of HIV virtually at the moment that you implement this strategy. And while treating everybody would be more expensive, as you see here, because you stop the generation of new infections, what you're doing is you're saving yourself a whole lot of new infections, therefore a lot of money, and after, within a decade, you are laughing all the way to the bank and you're saving millions and billions of dollars. Of course, most importantly, you would save yourself a lot of morbidity, a lot of mortality, and a tremendous number of new HIV infections. But I want to emphasize, this is a theoretical, hypothetical model. Only a computer can do things like this, instantaneously changing the parameters like that. But it serves to illustrate the potential impact that a true universal access to antiretroviral therapy could have, even in a region like South Africa. In British Columbia, we have been extremely fortunate that discussions with Gordon Campbell back in the day led to the support of these hypotheses. The quotas for antiretroviral therapy were never implemented, and in fact, year after year, we were able to engage him and his administration on a constructive discussion regarding further expansions of the antiretroviral therapy program. As a result, British Columbia is in a unique position to report rather marked decreases in AIDS-related morbidity. These are new AIDS cases reported in British Columbia as of 2009. The slide is not updated, but take my word for it, the number of cases continues to decrease since then. This is all-cause mortality among people ever initiating antiretroviral therapy. You can see that in 1996, we were seeing at least one person dying from HIV or with HIV per day in British Columbia. Today, that number is relatively small. It's never trivial, but really, comparatively speaking, we're seeing less than a person a month dying with HIV. So quite a remarkable improvement over the years. And more importantly, from a public health perspective, we have seen that at the same time that the number of people treated with antiretroviral therapy has grown steadily, there has been a consistent decrease in the number of new cases identified in Colombia, despite the fact that every year we test more, and yet every year we find less new cases of HIV. Notice that in the green, we highlight here the fact that the same thing is true for injection drug users. So this actually is, as I call it, a triple hat, or hat trick, because it really works for mother-to-child transmission, it works for sexual transmission, but it also works for parental transmission. And I often say it's a double hat trick because it not only decreases morbidity, but also decreases mortality and decreases transmission. So it's really a very satisfactory package when it comes to it. Sad but true, all of this is happening in British Columbia at a time in which we have not seen similar declines for hepatitis C, syphilis, chlamydia, or gonorrhea, indicating that it is not because of more conservative practices or decreased risk factors, but rather the fact that there is something specifically stopping HIV from being transmitted, in this case, highly active antiretroviral therapy. So, as you're aware, over the last few years, we have been working with the provincial government expanding HIV testing and treatment and everything in between throughout the province, but specifically in two areas of great concern, the downtown east side and Prince George. The reason why those two areas have been chosen is because at the time that the decision was made, there was excess mortality among people infected with HIV in those areas. So the Premier, Gordon Campbell, at the time, made the decision himself based on the data that was available. And given that the resources were limited, we had to agree with him that this was the most urgent areas to be addressed. So HIV testing. With regards to HIV testing, the pilots have actually had a beneficial impact in that the rate of testing, as you can see here, before the pilot and after the pilot for Vancouver Coastal and for the North has significantly changed. The rate of testing was relatively stable prior to the pilots, and you see the slope going up after the pilots, both in Vancouver Coastal and in the North. We also have piloted what we call normalized testing in acute care settings, meaning that people who come forward to either St. Paul's, Mount St. Joseph's, or Vancouver General to the emergency room for any reason, regardless of the reason, regardless of what your age is, or your sexual preference, or risk profile, everybody technically is being offered an HIV test. And what we have found is that the acceptance rate among people coming into the emergency room is very high, in excess of 90% pretty much across the board. And we also have found that the positivity rate is actually quite high, close to 1%. That means that 1% of the tests that are being done in the emergency room or in the Department of Medicine turn out to be positive. And it's important to note that this is new positives among people who are unaware that they're HIV positive, and for the most part, they don't have a risk factor that they acknowledge or recognize, and therefore their physicians are unaware that that individual could be HIV positive or should be a candidate for HIV testing. The message coming from these results is very simple and straightforward. To a large extent, we have exhausted our ability to identify people based on risk factors. So when you first walk into a community, the money basically is on asking people who have fit certain profile to get tested, because you're going to find a lot of people who are HIV positive within those communities. But as we test more and more among people who self-identify themselves as being potentially at risk for HIV, then you basically run out of candidates. And that's the case, for example, in Anthony's side, where we find less and less new unexpected HIV positives, because basically we tested almost everybody. So we're now sort of continuing to test, but the yield is very low. On the other hand, in the population at large, as shown by these results, the yield is actually quite significant. The CDC in Atlanta has studied this issue and has concluded that for HIV campaigns to be cost effective, the anticipated return in terms of the rate of positives coming back should be in the 1 per 1,000. We are currently finding 1 per 100 approximately. What that means is that really we're laughing all the way to the bank. This is highly cost effective. So we are in the process of trying to convince the rest of the province that normalized testing is the way to go. Next, HIV treatment. With regards to HIV treatment, this is a complex slide, but just take the general trends from me. What you see here is Vancouver Coastal, this is the North. Overall, the number of people accessing treatment has gone up significantly in Vancouver Coastal, and in the northern area, regrettably, while the excess investment has led to a significant increase in the number of people going on treatment in those two areas, it hasn't quite worked in the rest of the province, and you see that the trends actually are the opposite. There are less people going on treatment in the other 3 health authorities. So overall, the rate of growth of the treatment program has remained relatively stable. What we need is to recruit the other 3 areas, Vancouver Island, Fraser, and the interior, to ensure that they put the same effort that we have put in Vancouver Coastal and Prince George in the North, so that we can truly bring treatment to people in need throughout the province, not just in the 2 areas of interest. The third component of the strategy is to try to enhance the engagement within the cascade of care. This is a fairly recent way of sort of approaching this subject. It largely derived from a paper written from a group of friends of us, Garner and Carlos Del Rio and others, in Emory University. This was published early in 2011 in the CID. And what they did is they tried to characterize or map, if you want, the level of engagement of people infected with HIV in the United States in various sort of discrete domains that relate to the HIV experience from a medical perspective. And so they identified things that can be readily measured. First is the number of people infected with HIV as a whole, then those that are diagnosed, those that are linked to care, those that are retaining care, those that are needing antiretroviral therapy, those that are on antiretroviral therapy, and those that are adherent and undetectable from a virological standpoint. You certainly can come up with different definitions. You can like to collapse some of those or not. I don't think it really matters. This is one way of describing where people are at in the continuum of care within the spectrum of HIV disease. And what you see here is that in the United States, they estimated that there are 1.1 million people infected with HIV, and then at every step in the cascade of care, this cascade is leaking, and it's leaking about 20% per step. What that means is at the end of the day, we are left with only 200,000 people who are adherent and detectable out of 1.1 million. This is 19% of people infected with HIV being actually undetectable. That's rather pathetic. What that means is that because this cascade is so leaky, you end up with very few people, relatively speaking, being undetectable at the end of the day. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, was a bit upset about this situation, so they very quickly went on to review these using their own in-house experts, and they published a paper about a year later in the MMWR where they said, no, the calculations are all wrong, the numbers are actually underestimating the true engagement in the cascade of care, and they came out with an estimate of close to 30%, it's 28%. It's almost just as pathetic. From my perspective, at the time we were trying to have an epidemiological impact in terms of morbidity, mortality, and transmission, having 30% of the people undetectable is actually not good enough. Something needs to be done about it. We have actually looked at this issue in British Columbia, and I'm happy to tell you that we have data to look at these year after year, 96 to 2010, and we have used the same definitions. And suffice to say that what we've been able to show is that every year we see an improvement in pretty much all of the domains that you're looking at. So that at the end of the day, we have approximately somewhere around 40 to 55% of people undetectable. And I'm not happy about that, but what that tells you is that somewhere between the 20 and the 50% is where you need to be, higher, closer to the 50% if you're going to have a true epidemiological impact, because the United States is not seeing the kind of impact that we're seeing here. We're currently proposing to the government that these become the sort of mantra underpinning the continued expansion of antiretroviral therapy in the province of British Columbia. And we would like to be able to go to the health authorities and say, I don't really care what you're doing or what you're not doing. I want you to show me, do your cascade, and I want you to demonstrate to me that your cascade is getting better year after year as a result of your efforts. I also thought it would be important that I show you a cross-Canada comparison regarding what's going on with regards to these issues across the country. You've seen this slide before, some of you have anyways. This was presented by Bob Gott at the IES conference early this summer. And what it shows is that British Columbia is unique in Canada because it has seen a decline in the number of new infections, which is in contrast to every other region of the country, and more particularly so in contrast to the prairies, where, as you know, Saskatchewan in particular has seen a 5-fold increase in the number of new infections, largely because of an epidemic among First Nations that unfortunately has not been completely unsuccessfully dealt with. I've been in Saskatchewan, as a number of other colleagues of mine from the center. We have offered them to work with them to try to adapt our model to Saskatchewan. We're waiting for the phone call. The paper is now in press in PLOS, we just heard about it last week. And I think it's important to point out that BC has seen a very substantial rate of averted HIV cases per year, and that actually this is on the increase. So the good news is that we are just at the beginning of what I think it can be truly revolutionary in terms of how much more prevention we are going to see as we continue to expand our programs. So where do we go from here? Well, we need to do more of the same. We need to recognize that treatment as prevention has now been shown not only in our ecological and epidemiological studies, but in a large randomized controlled prospective study carried out by the Americans, HPTN-052, to be at least 96% effective in preventing HIV transmission, over and above the fact that was also able to decrease morbidity and mortality, and I don't think I need to convince anybody about that. Immediate antiretroviral therapy was greatly successful in stopping transmission. This summer, at the AIDS conference, Mario Cohen, who is the author of this paper, presented further data, which is complex enough, but at the end of the day, demonstrated that antiretroviral therapy, actually, if appropriately taken, once a person is undetectable, is 100% effective on stopping HIV transmission. I thought you'd like to hear that. So, as our friend Nico said from the community groups internationally in Europe said to me and to the public a number of times, this is the best news I ever received. Because one thing is to tell me that the treatment is going to make me grow old and healthy, but the burden of me worrying every day that I'm going to pass HIV on to my partner is something that I always found extremely difficult to live with. The fact that he now knows that appropriate suppression with antiretroviral therapy, and he has been suppressed in 1996, renders him virtually unable to transmit HIV is actually tremendous news. On that note, if you allow me a digression, it is rather pathetic that in this country, the federal government is insisting on criminalizing exposure to HIV, even among people who are HIV undetectable, simply because they are refusing to embrace the results of the science. That's my good friend Harper for you. Anyways, what you see here is another important slide. There has been a lot of noise, I call it noise, regarding the role of other preventive technologies in the field of HIV. And I am talking about biomedical prevention technologies. Vaccines, PrEP, microbicides, you name it. I think that all of that is very interesting, but in my opinion, it's a huge distraction. If you look at efficacy alone, as illustrated in this slide, which by the way, I didn't do it myself, the microbicide people did it, you see that vaccine is poorly effective, if effective at all. Microbicides, just bad. Treatment of sexually transmitted diseases, it's, of course, we want to do it, but that doesn't mean that it will stop transmission. PrEP, it can be anywhere from 0 to 80% effective, depending how you take it or not. At the end of the day, the most effective way of preventing transmission is actually treatment as prevention. Not only treatment as prevention is by far the most effective way of stopping HIV, it's the most cost effective. Why? Because people who have HIV infection, they need treatment anyways. So why are we going to divert resources to do other things when we know that we have an opportunity to get this hat trick twice over or over again by just doing what we're supposed to be doing to begin with? Not only that, but when you go out there chasing people at risk, it could be one, it could be 1,000, it could be 1,000,000 people in the province of British Columbia. But if you focus on treating people who are HIV infected, we know that there are somewhere around 12,000 full stop. Those are the people that need to be treated. And they are motivated, as much as I am, to get on with the business most of the time anyways. So this is actually a smart investment, and I'm happy to tell you that the province of British Columbia is fully committed to continue this investment. I met with Margaret McDermott, the new Minister of Health, earlier this week for an hour, and she had given me her assurance that everything is on the table except our HIV treatment program. So I'm waiting to hear from her what the marching orders will be for the future, but in the meantime, there is no re-examining of what we're doing here today. And part of the answer is here. This is a paper by Julio Montaner, a friend of mine from WHO. Actually, as of this week, he switched over to UNAIDS, where he used some of the data that we had generated to look at what would be the cost effectiveness of expanding antiretroviral therapy for the treatment and prevention of HIV in South Africa. So this is taking the model that I showed you earlier in the Lancet, saying what happens if you treat everybody. And so he says now, okay, what would be the impact of that? Well, if you treat at 200 CD4s, that's your baseline. You now move to 350 CD4s, you save a whole bunch of lives. At 500 CD4s, you save even more. And here there is a blue line. This is treating everybody immediately, and you actually save even more lives in the hundreds of thousands in Africa. Now, from a cost perspective, everybody gets really nervous when you say we're going to treat everybody or offer treatment to everybody. And then, let's be clear, when I say we're going to treat everybody, it means that we're going to offer treatment to everybody. You do, as you know, whatever you want. But at the end of the day, the issue is, can we offer treatment to everybody? And the model says that treating more people, 350, 500, or offering treatment to everybody, will cost more in the short term. But look at how quickly this curve comes down below zero, and you actually start to accrue a benefit. In fact, after a matter of 5 to 10 years, you accrue a net gain, so that treatment as prevention becomes cost averting. Cost averting means cost saving. What that means is that there are net gains, economical net gains to be made by offering treatment to everybody infected with HIV, even in Africa. So there is no two ways around it. This actually makes a lot of sense, no matter where you fall in the political spectrum, whether you are in the extreme left or the extreme right. There is an argument here that should work for everybody. So in British Columbia, our plan is to continue to promote quote-unquote normalized HIV testing. I won't expand on that. The reason for that is that by engaging people in testing, what you do is you decrease the number of people who are HIV positive and known, who are actually the engine of the spread of HIV. For the most part, people who are unaware that they are HIV infected cannot look after their own health, but at the same time, they cannot protect their partners. And so they are typically at least 3 times more likely to spread HIV than those that are unaware. And then what we want to do is apply the most current guidelines so that we can offer treatment to all people infected with HIV. Back in 2010, the International AIDS Society USA, I was a member of the panel at the time, recommended treatment basically be offered to everybody infected with HIV unless they were long-term non-progressive. We were criticized from a number of angles, but I'm happy to tell you that as of March 27, 2012, the Department of Human Health and Services in the United States has basically endorsed exactly the same guidelines. And then we're among the ones that criticize us. And since then, the World Health Organization, who had a lot of difficulty moving in this direction because they were under a lot of pressure by some of the most poor countries in the world who were very reluctant to embrace more aggressive treatment guidelines have actually done so. And as you can see here, at the April meeting here in Vancouver, at the treatment prevention workshop, they released their new guidelines where they actually are starting to talk about offering treatment regardless of CD4 counts to people who got CD4 counts over 350 if they are in severe discordant couples. So the discussion is over. There is consensus in the north, in the south, in the east and the west, in Africa, in the WHO, that offering treatment to everybody is actually sound. The question is, are we going to get the resources that are needed to do that? And on that note, I'm happy to tell you that while we don't have all of the resources, something has started to change. Not a Stephen Carter yet. But UNH in 2010, following Michel Silive's visit to UBC, this is the Felicidad campus, where he did a site visit with us and learned everything about treatment and prevention. He went on to actually endorse this in a letter to the partners that year, saying treatment and prevention is the way to go. This was embraced by Hillary Clinton last year, who spoke vehemently in favor of reprofiling the PEPFAR monies to support predominantly mother-to-child transmission, which is a form of treatment and prevention, and medicine precision as the three cornerstones of the fight against HIV in the south of the world. And it was further echoed by President Clinton, who basically said, as I read here, few could have imagined that we'd be talking about the real possibility of an AIDS-free generation. But that's what we're talking about. Make no mistake, we're going to win this fight. And to be honest with you, I like the guy, I like his energy, and I am confident that if re-elected, he will deliver on his promise of at least expanding the contribution to PEPFAR, which, by the way, he already expanded this summer during the International AIDS Conference. From my personal selfish perspective, my favorite slide is the next one. President Bill Clinton at the International AIDS Conference, he made the closing remarks in front of the full audience, and he said, in short, we should have been doing what Julio has been saying for the longest time. If we would have done that, we would have saved millions and millions of lives. Like that, I love it. President Clinton was here last week. We spent an hour together, and he actually has pledged to do his part to help us hopefully get further support from the federal government and from a number of governments around the world in this campaign. I am delighted and humbled and thrilled to count President Clinton among our advocates. This is poised to make a huge difference. On that note, I'd like to finish and answer any questions you may have, which may be related to this or anything else. Thank you.
We've seen some recent coverage around discrepancies between seroviral load and seminal viral load. Can you reflect on that significance and how it might relate to vaginal fluids and mucosal secretions?
There are several papers that have looked at the concordance or discordance of the amount of virus in central fluids and in plasma. And like anything else in biology, there is variability, and they have identified individuals who have detectable virus in the semen, and for that matter, it could be anywhere else when you look into, and they have raised the flag that we have to be very careful when we tell people, oh, well, don't worry, you're not infectious. Yeah, I mean, we have to be careful. Having said that, the way you answer questions in clinical medicine is by doing randomized controlled clinical trials. And the randomized control clinical trial, which included a large number of people, showed that transmission events did not occur. Can I tell you, can I sign you a check, basically, saying that a person infected with HIV with undetectable will not transmit? No, I can't. I can say that you're remarkably, dramatically less likely to transmit, that based on clinical trials, it could well be that this is not going to happen. But the problem is that the assays that measure the virus can be measuring dead virus, dirty virus, rotten virus, parts of virus, and so the fact that signals emerge doesn't really mean a whole lot. People that are being followed on treatment, and I know many of you are, in our own clinic, they know that there is a rate of false positivity when we use the current Tachman assay. So that people can be adequately suppressed, and the plasma load comes back detectable, bleeping at low levels, and I've done the research to demonstrate that those blips don't mean anything, and we tell people as long as you're bleeping under 250 and this is intermittent, don't worry. So, yes, there are cases where this has been shown. So far, it hasn't led to a documented case of transmission. I'm sure one is going to be documented soon enough. So the answer is, the more protection you take over and above treatment, the better. But my patients tell me that wearing condoms is the exception, not the rule. And so I want to continue to encourage them to use condoms, but at the same time I want to be honest and truthful and say, look, in clinical trials, the likelihood of transmission, if you've been long-term HIV suppressed, is remote. But if you take additional precautions, that would be great.
But you said remote, but earlier you said like 100% chance, from 96% to 100, like that.
Yeah. So let me explain you how it works.
Okay.
In clinical trials, because you have a sample, right? The fact that you don't see something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So let me put it this way. If the likelihood that a person will have green hair is 1 in 1,000, if it's 1 in 10, the fact that I don't see anyone here means that the water that you drank prevents your hair from going green. Whatever. But if it's 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 100,000, the fact that I don't see anybody with green hair here doesn't mean anything. So in a clinical trial, because you have two arms, one that does apply the intervention and the other doesn't, it allows you to say, relatively speaking, what is the level of protection that the intervention gave you. So it was greater than 96%, the decrease in transmission. That was given by one case of transmission against 20 or so in the immediate arm versus in the deferred arm. The one case of transmission in the immediate arm occurred before that person had been suppressed on antiretroviral therapy. And so, if you account for that, what that says is that if you now look after people became undetectable, there were no transmissions. Can I tell you that if we wait 10 more years, on a sample size that is now, instead of 1,000, is 10,000, we would not have seen one? No, I can't. Now, the question back to you is, how much does it take for you to be comfortable that it's remote? It's good as it's going to get. And as I often tell people, life is full of risks. I jaywalk like crazy, and my youngest daughter thinks that I'm nuts. When she grew up here, I grew up in Argentina. In Argentina, whether you jaywalk or cross the corner, it doesn't matter. You're going to get killed anyways. What I'm saying is that we all live within our comfort zone. And don't get me wrong, I don't have any, I don't take HIV transmission casually, but I'm reasonably comfortable that we're getting as close to 100% protection as we can. If people are willing and able to use another method of protection, please go ahead and do it. Most of my patients tell me, Julio, it ain't going to happen here. So I have to learn to live with, it's all about harm reduction. how much further can I reduce the harm? So that's my full answer. Next question.
It's great to hear that Mark McDermott is on the slide with this, but maybe you should be checking with Adrian Dix and his team, because I think there's going to be a change in government.
Hey, don't worry. Adrian is totally important.
Yeah, that's good to hear that. Question regarding the stop treatment in terms of, like, it seems like you're pushing the case for it to be included province-wide. Is that in the cards next for this?
I'm only allowed to tell you that we've been having this discussion with the provincial government now for the last several months. The discussions are moving in the right direction. They continue to be interested and supportive. It doesn't escape anybody that we're dealing with difficult fiscal times. However, I think that Minister McDermott understands that at times difficult decisions have to be made, and I believe that she is very supportive. Stay tuned, the discussions continue. I am hopeful, but that's the best I can tell you.
Sorry, I was just going to say the government's probably going to change in 5 months anyway.
I'd like this program to be expanded tomorrow. So, and if they change, fine. If they don't change, they're all my friends anyway.
Yeah.
I applaud you for bringing treatment prevention concept. What came up in the IAS was another bit of a concept, and it was a Visconti study.
What?
Visconti study. That's the study that sort of says that if you go through early treatment and get to a point of homeostasis where you can create a functional cure for the disease. What are your thoughts about that?
Look, we have treated a lot of people early, experimentally and otherwise over the years. And there have been initiatives before where we treated people very early on, immediately upon seroconversion. Sometimes even before the Western blot turns positive. In fact, we did one of the studies with Glaxo back in the day, and the results have been disappointing. Yes, a number of people came out of those studies with suppressed viral load, but if you go back and look into it, the longer we follow those people, the virus came back. So it's like, you know, I may be too old and remember things that nobody remembers, or maybe people are trying to be hopeful that something magic is going to happen with the new drugs, etc. I honestly doubt it. But, you know, at the end of the day, if that is proven to be right, and I don't really see that antiretroviral therapy biologically has a chance to do that without help. If it does, and if it does with some help, by having the whole province of British Columbia available and undetectable, hopefully, we will be in a unique position to then add whatever needs to be added to finish the job. So I think that as long as the effort is going in that direction, it's great. It would be very worrisome to me if tomorrow we hear, oh, there is a cure, but people who were treated with antiretroviral therapy, they're not eligible. That would be problematic. But the fact that we're all moving in the right direction and that whatever hint we're getting is that the cure at this time, the only thing that is intellectually being conceived is as an add-on to antiretroviral therapy, that works for me.
In looking at the cascade of care in Vancouver, you say that roughly 50% of people diagnosed are ending up with suppressed viral load. So where do you think the leaks are in our cascade of care?
Well, actually, the leaks are for everybody to see them because we have them documented, and they are throughout the cascade of care. We have a lot less leaking than the Americans have because they leak approximately 20% per step. But we have a problem with retention of care. That's the biggest drop for us. Once we retain people on care, we do fairly well until we get down to adherence and we lose a little bit. So at this level, anything from retain to initiating therapy and being on treatment, we are doing very well. We need a better effort at engaging people into treatment and retaining them there, and we need a better effort at this end on bringing these last 2 bars, increasing adherence and making it suppressive. So what are we doing? At this end, we have started a nominal campaign. The nominal campaign is a letter that goes from us to your sort of treater, and it says, "Dear Dr. such and such, we noticed that you have patient Julio Montaner in your practice who has been on antiretroviral therapy, has a detectable viral load, which is not really what we recommend, and therefore we are here to help you. Do you need more social support? Do you need more new drugs? Do you need different testing? You know, and when you don't respond, you get a phone call, and you know, we escalate and the next thing you know, I visit them personally. So that's at the distal end here. At the proximal end, what we're doing is we're talking to the health authorities to use the same system that we use for contact tracing, the community nurses, so that hopefully we can get them engaged. When there is a person that tested positive, say there is a Julio Montaner that tested positive and he got depressed, he got crazy, he said, no way, I'm not positive, I'm going away, bye. So we would like to send a community worker, a peer, or somebody that will hopefully work to bring this person back into reality, have an engagement process, and see if we can reach this other one here. What is not shown here is the HIV positive unknown, because we can't plot what we don't know. So we decided that plotting that is ridiculous. But what we're doing for that is normalizing HIV testing, which should make testing available to a larger number of people, and hopefully we can find more of those. So this is the 3-pronged approach. We're heavily testing that in McCord Coastal, which has the heaviest burden, and in fact, they have been highly motivated and very supported by David, Rega Gustafson, Rolando Barrios, and others. And so we're working with them. We're confident that those strategies will work. How much better they're going to work, we're not sure. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Unlike Julio, I don't have any disclosures, but I'm also happy to take money from anywhere. I'm going to spend about 20 minutes or so showing some photos and talking about my experience in Washington, D.C. this summer. I am curious to know how many of you have ever been to an international conference before. Raise your hand. Maybe a quarter of you. So just so you know, the scale is very huge. It's this was the biggest conference ever with over 24,000 people, and it lasts for close to a week or longer if you count in added meetings that are before and after. There are about 200 sessions, so people from all over the world. It's really impossible to attend all the sessions, of course. So my presentation is going to be just a little small snippet of what I was able to fit in. On day one, this was the Keep the Promise March on Washington. And since I was a media rep for Positive Living, I needed to take a bunch of photos, and I thought, oh, this is a perfect opportunity. There's the White House, I can get a good shot, and I ran around taking lots of photos of this. And I soon discovered that it was not the White House. And yes, it looks very white. It looks very important, but it is not the White House. Does anyone know what it is? Oh, so some of you know a little bit more about historical buildings than myself. And unbeknownst to me, I did make it to the White House eventually. This is me and Patience Naomi at my side, who's also here tonight and attended the conference. And I don't know if you knew of Patience, but I didn't know I was at the White House until I looked at the photo later. Something else new, this was the first cheerleaders at a protest march and a marching band. And I did wonder, was this a protest or a parade? But it did really confirm that I was definitely in America. So this was the very first time in 22 years that the International AIDS Conference was held in the U.S. And that was due to the travel ban on people with HIV. And this was finally lifted in 2010. So that was good news. So it enabled, because the International AIDS Conference has a strong commitment to including people with HIV in all levels of the conference, they were again willing to hold the conference in the US. So a lot of people spoke about this. But, however, there was also a lot of talk about many voices missing. No drug users, no sex workers, no International AIDS Conference is what's written on that sign. And that was heard around the conference a lot because of strict visa restrictions to get into the U.S. Anyone with previous history of drug use or sex work would be unable to attend. Plus, the process itself is a nightmare just to apply for a visa. So this was really, people were vocal about this because in the fight against HIV, of course, we need all voices to be involved, especially those who are most at risk. And even many conference speakers who were lined up to speak, they weren't able to get into the conference. So some of them just had to have webcast or send a message because they couldn't get into the conference, into the U.S. So these are a lot of the messages that were heard frequently throughout the conference, especially the top one, the AIDS-free generation that Hillary Clinton came up with a couple of years ago. The first three, zero infections and the end of AIDS, AIDS-free generation, they all kind of refer to the same thing, that with our multiple ways of preventing HIV, and mostly treatment as prevention, that we can eventually end HIV. And then vaccine, that's been on the agenda for many years and continues to be. That's also, well, nothing's really changed a lot in terms of that. The cure, the media picked up on this, the idea of a cure, and that's because there was a launch of a new strategy for the cure. And cure, just so people are clear, it means absolutely eradicating the virus. So not just having an undetectable viral load, but having no virus and not needing any treatment. So why now is a question I wondered. When we have good treatment, why are we going to spend a lot of money and a lot of effort on looking for a cure? And a couple of reasons were presented. Mostly, treatment is difficult to access for many, for most around the world. And treatment is really expensive. And also, it doesn't eradicate the virus. So it's lifelong, we have lifelong challenges of adherence. And then there have been recent scientific advances. Mostly, some of you might have heard of the Berlin patient, Timothy Brown, who had a bone marrow transplant, and inadvertently his HIV was cured. So because of knowledge gained from that, people are optimistic. And I just want you to see, this woman is one of my new heroes. Her name is Françoise Barré-Sinoussi. She's from France, and she's leading this working group to find a cure. And also she's the new president of the International AIDS Society that puts on the international conference. And she's not only a brilliant scientist, but she's really committed to global issues and human rights. And she's feisty. So I like her. And here's another very feisty woman. As you can see in her body language, she was very passionate when she spoke. She was speaking at one of the plenaries on women's issues. And she's really a fearless fighter. She's from Washington, D.C., and she's an educator and an activist, and she's also a positive woman. So she told her personal story, and she called for meaningful involvement of women at every level. And she stated she was not going to ask for anything, because women have been asking to be included for over 2 decades. And she said, I'll quote her, Today I stand here to give you some directions. We've decided to stop asking. Maybe you just need the recipe. Yeah, it is very powerful. And you can go online, and I can give you information later for the website. You can see these plenary talks if you're interested. So Linda also did talk about HIV in Washington, D.C., and as Julio said, the U.S. does have a lot more challenges with getting people into care, and actually 10% of Black women in Washington, D.C. are HIV positive, which is a really high rate. And also young Black men who have sex with men are also at high risk. There are lots of public health campaigns, banners all around the city saying, ask for the test. It makes a healthier city for us all. And also another campaign called We Are Greater Than AIDS. This is Phil Wilson. He was another really inspiring plenary speaker, and he's the director of the Black AIDS Institute, national organization. He's also HIV positive, and he did a plenary on ending HIV in the US. And I love this quote that I have up here. It's just so simply put and just really says it all about treatment as prevention. That treatment may be prevention, but first treatment is treatment. And I think that brings the individual more to the foreground. And he also spoke passionately saying he believes that everyone with HIV must come out in order to stem the stigma. And he did recognize it's not safe for all to do that, but everyone who can should take that step, that it really does make a difference. So Julio spoke a lot about treatment as prevention, and as you can tell, it's been very accepted now as a method around the world. There's still some debate about starting treatment immediately. The jury is still out on that, and there are some clinical trials. Because you have to look at, if you're going to be taking meds for the rest of your life, if you're going to start them, right after you get diagnosed, that's, who knows, we still don't know what the really long-term toxicities of these meds are. And there's also lots of talk at the conference about human rights and making sure that people living with HIV are really at the center of treatment as prevention efforts. And that prevention is really the secondary benefit to treatment. And the first benefit is our own health. So this is about pre-exposure prophylaxis. What is that? Well, it is, it's basically treating people who are negative with antiretrovirals in order to prevent them from becoming positive. So this would be, and this has just been approved in the US as a practice that Truvada is the main drug being used for this. So it's not a brand new concept or anything, but it is the first time now that that's been approved to be used that way. And some of the concerns that were raised were around the cost of it, because it can cost about $38 a day to take that kind of prevention method. And if you compare it to a condom, which costs less than $1 for each condom, that was a big cost difference. Adherence is another concern, and during trials it's a lot easier for people to take a medication when you're getting reminders and you're in a trial, but in the real world it's hard to know how that would pan out. And then also just concerns about making sure that it would be used in combination with other prevention methods, and people wouldn't think, oh, I'm on this Truvada and it's the HIV pill and I don't need to worry about it anymore. This is the Global Village, and it really is the heartbeat of the conference. It's a hub, a really amazing place for networking. There are about 24 networking zones, different topics. For example, these ones I'm showing, there's a women's networking zone, a Latino networking zone, and the other one is just a general pandemonium. It's really fun place, interesting, dynamic, and engaging place to go and hang out and just stumble across all sorts of interesting talks and performances, gospel choir, drag show, art, film screenings. So there's a lot going on there. I wanted just to show you an image of the Indigenous Peoples Networking Zone, because that was partly organized by the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network. And I also wanted to show this image of the AIDS Memorial Quilt, and I thought it was really meaningful to have it on display in Washington throughout the conference, and a poignant reminder of why we do this work. Then there was another march in the middle of midweek. It was very large. It started in the Global Village, and the theme of it was mobilization for economic justice and human rights. And so it was really 5 marches in one, and it ended at the White House this time. These are the 5 key issues. So to have make sure that we have global funding for treatment and local funding for housing and needle exchanges. Vancouver's way far ahead with harm reduction and anywhere in the world pretty much. We're very fortunate. And treatment access for women, accountability from pharmaceutical companies and governments, and also ending criminalization of sex workers, drug users, and people living with HIV. This was my favorite march. It was the Women's March, and great energy and great manner. So, but I did make it into 3. I did some hopping between marches, and I was able to get into three of the different marches. So that was a pretty energizing protest. There was a lot of focus on youth at this conference, and actually the highest number of youth attended, over 2,000. And this is really important, as you can see in the second point, that out of new infections, that 42% are in young people. So there were many sessions from prevention to leadership and mentorship, and also how AIDS service organizations can better engage youth. And the Global Network of People Living with HIV has put out a booklet on just that topic that just came out at the conference. There were also panels, a really interesting panel I went to that had some youth, some folks, some young people who were born HIV positive, and they spoke very openly and honestly about what that's been like, and especially during the adolescent period where they have to deal with dating and disclosure. So those were some interesting parts. And then on the other at the other end of the age spectrum, there was a lot of focus on aging and HIV. So basically, if you're under 30 and over 50, but people in their 40s are not really. Well, I'm in my last year, so I have to just milk it for a while. But so in terms of, yes, the HIV positive population is getting older, which is great, but it also is going to be challenging, because as we age, naturally all of us do have health issues. So it's going to be complex for some of us with HIV, perhaps. But kind of what reassured me to hear that we're not really aging faster. The studies aren't showing that. It's more that it's just there are more complications, and they can be more accentuated and more challenging to treat too. As you get more illnesses, you need new medications. They might interact with HIV meds. So all of that is tricky. But good news overall, really, that we now have near normal life expectancy. It was really great to see a lot about stigma at this conference, and there was one session titled "No Getting to Zero New Infections Without Stigma Reduction." And it's so true that, along with all our, treatment and treatment as prevention, we're not going to have zero new infections if we don't deal with things like stigma. And the criminalization of HIV and how that's taking us backwards, that was raised over and over also as a big barrier. and just so tied in with the stigma, taking us backwards, really, I believe. So yeah, there were many sessions on criminalization. One was called Get a Test, Risk Arrest, really highlighting how many people are reluctant to even get a test when they start hearing about all these cases of people being charged. There was a really interesting panel with this man who obviously is very open with his status and with the fact that he was jailed for 6 months and labeled a sex offender. He says he did disclose to his partner, and they had a bad breakup, and he could not prove that he disclosed, so now he's ended up with sex offender on his license that'll be for 15 years. So he's become a spokesperson, and there's an article written about him in a newsletter called The Chief, if you want to read about him a bit more. The global scale-up of treatment, what I mean by this is the increasing number of people who are able to access treatment. It's just amazing how fast it's been going in the last, in the last 5 years it's doubled. There are now around 8 million people in resource-limited countries or developing countries who are on treatment. But the United Nations, they make goals all the time, and their most recent goal is to have 15 million people on treatment, so nearly double by the year 2015. And also MTCT, which stands for mother-to-child transmission, the goal is to get that to 0, which is entirely possible. And the strategies, some of the strategies that I heard about that caught my attention in the global scale-up were text messaging, and apparently there are more people in the world now with cell phones than toothbrushes. So they're inexpensive, and so that's become a popular method. Send people at your clinic might send a text message saying, "How are you doing today?" or "Did you take your meds?" or that kind of thing. Also, the expanding role of nurses. I heard there were quite a few nurses here, actually, so you might be interested to hear this, that lots of policies are changing and which are enabling nurses to expand their role, and even prescribe HIV meds and monitor HIV patients. So instead of just having doctors do that, in many countries where there aren't enough doctors, or doctors are in big cities or hospitals that people living rurally just can't get to. So whereas a nurse is at the community clinic perhaps, and it'd be a lot more accessible. So that's good news. Also, door-to-door testing, hearing about going into neighborhoods, also in the US, and knocking on people's doors and starting to do HIV awareness and education that way. And community ARV groups. I just read about this one after the conference, actually, and I was really inspired by it. And it was through Doctors Without Borders, and they were doing I'm not exactly sure what their project was, but the people with HIV, the patients in their project, they created their own groups of antiretroviral or HIV medication groups, support groups in a way, but they would actually do a really practical task of one person would go and pick up the meds for everybody. And then it was helping people with adherence a lot, and everyone's mutually interested, and also very practical. People don't have to take time away from family or work to get their medications. So that was inspiring. I also was really happy to hear that there's a lot of peer work going on globally, and it was really, finally it feels like the value of people with HIV working alongside peers is becoming more recognized by decision makers and funders. Even Julio mentioned it tonight. And, that just pointing out that we as positive people can do a lot. We do, emotional support is very important, but we can do way more beyond that in helping folks learn about HIV and getting folks connected to care and taking their meds and overall just improving their health. And so I heard echoes from around the world about this, and it gave me lots of optimism. So I really feel like the tide is turning, and at every international AIDS conference I get an incredible feeling of inspiration and hope to be around that many people who are all working to fight HIV in many, many different ways. It really is the community-led approaches that with people living with HIV in the center, and I think that's what really makes a big difference. And I also, even in this room, I feel really that everyone here in some way or another is doing something to help fight HIV, and even just by being here and informing yourself. So I want to thank you all for listening and for being here. Thanks.
I was wondering if there was any focus on the outrageous profit levels of U.S. drug companies and getting them to reduce that.
So the question is about protesting pharmaceutical companies for price gouging. I didn't actually see any of those, except I did see some photographs if you go to the AIDS 2012 site, actually it was not on that site, it was somewhere else. It was the Gilead pharmaceutical that got the biggest protest at their booth, at their exhibit booth, and that was for having very high prices of Truvada, which is now being promoted as PrEP, it's called. And you could talk to Fred West. Gilead is sponsoring tonight's evening, so you could also ask Fred about that.
Actually, this was a question I wanted to ask Julio that extracting. You know, we're talking about how frustrating it is finding people, getting people on treatment. Has anybody ever talked about having like mandatory testing and mandatory treatment? Has that ever come to the conference? What do you think of that concept?
I would be utterly opposed to any mandatory anything, but
lives to be saved from that.
well, true, but you look at the other side of the coin. That's a real complete. This would not be a human. If you look at human rights, to say you need to take medication, that's just kind of outrageous in my mind. And I know there was nothing talking about that. There were people speaking out saying they want to make sure that that isn't happening and that there's no subtle kind of coercion for people to start taking meds. Even that is too much, that people really need to be able to make an informed choice before they start taking meds. But definitely not to be forced or mandatory in any way.